She had always thought she belonged somewhere, that she had a family who loved her and a home where she was safe, but life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Ever since she was little, she had lived with her adoptive family, people who had promised to care for her, guide her, and make her feel like she was one of their own. For a long time, things seemed fine. She had meals, a bed to sleep in, and the comfort of knowing someone was looking out for her. She believed that family was forever, that no matter what happened, she would always have a place to go, a shoulder to lean on. But then, one ordinary day, everything changed. It wasn't a fight, nor a warning, nor a long build-up of tension. It was sudden, shocking, and completely unexpected. Her adoptive family told her she could no longer stay, that she needed to leave the house immediately. The words hit her like a thunderbolt, freezing her in place for a moment as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. She begged them to explain, asked what she had done wrong, but all she got was cold, indifferent looks, and repeated instructions to pack her things and go. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, sadness, anger, and fear, all mixing together in a storm that left her feeling dizzy and lost. The place she had called home for years suddenly felt like a stranger's house. The warmth she had known turned into emptiness. Her heart ached as she realized she had nowhere to turn, no familiar arms to comfort her, and no one to tell her that everything would be okay. As she stepped out of the house, dragging her small bag behind her, the world outside felt bigger, harsher, and more frightening than she had ever imagined. She walked through the streets feeling invisible, like no one noticed her, like she had vanished from the life she once knew. Every sound of laughter, every family passing by, reminded her of what she had lost, and every shadow made her shiver as the reality of being alone sank deeper into her mind. She had to figure out where to go, what to eat, and how to survive, but even more than that, she had to come to terms with the fact that people she had trusted could turn their backs on her so easily. The idea that family wasn't always forever was something she had never thought about, and now she was living it, each step away from her old home heavier than the last, filled with the weight of heartbreak. Despite her fear, she tried to stay strong, telling herself that she could get through this, that she would find a way, but the nights were the hardest. When the sun went down and the streets emptied, loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, and tears she had been holding back began to fall. She thought about the little moments she missed, the conversations that now felt meaningless, the hugs she wished she could still get, and the future that suddenly seemed uncertain. Yet, even in that dark moment, something inside her refused to give up. A tiny spark of hope flickered, reminding her that life could change again, that maybe, just maybe, someone kind would appear, that maybe her story wasn't over, that maybe she could find a new beginning. She didn't know how or when, but she held on to that hope because it was all she had left. As she wandered the streets, feeling small and unseen, she realized this was the first chapter of a journey she never expected to take, a journey that would challenge her, test her courage, and force her to discover strength she didn't know she had. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also a moment that could lead to something incredible. She just had no idea yet what that something would be. And so, with her bag in hand and her heart heavy but still beating with hope, she stepped into the unknown, not knowing what awaited her, but ready, somehow, to face it. This was the day her life turned upside down, the day that marked the beginning of a story full of heartbreak, survival, and a chance encounter that would one day change everything. The streets were not kind to her, not even a little. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, as if the world itself was pressing down on her small shoulders. She had nowhere to go, no one to call, and the cold wind of the evening seemed to mock her loneliness. She wandered aimlessly at first, hoping to find some familiar face, some place that felt safe, but every corner she turned only reminded her of how alone she truly was. She tried to hold herself together, telling herself she would be fine, that she just needed to find a place to rest for the night, but the city was a maze of strangers, people too busy with their own lives to notice the small, scared girl walking along the sidewalks. She peeked into shop windows, hoping someone might look back at her, hoping for a kind smile, but all she saw were reflections of her own tired face staring back at her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, reminding her that survival was more than just finding shelter. She searched the alleys and corners for scraps, sometimes finding old bread thrown away, other times nothing at all. Her stomach ached, but she forced herself to keep moving, telling herself that sitting down or giving up would only make things worse. She slept wherever she could, sometimes under the faint glow of a street lamp, sometimes in a small corner behind a closed store. The nights were long and cold, and every noise made her heart race, every passing car felt like a thunderclap, every distant shout made her flinch. She missed the warmth of a bed, the comfort of a blanket, the security of walls that felt like home, but those were gone now, and she had to find a new way to survive. Even in the harshest moments, she clung to small things that reminded her of hope, a kind word from a stranger, the soft light of dawn, the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. These tiny things reminded her that the world was not completely cruel, that there might still be kindness waiting for her somewhere. She started learning quickly how to navigate life on the streets, how to avoid dangerous places, how to keep herself hidden from people who might harm her. Every decision became critical, every step measured. She discovered strength she didn't know she had, the kind of strength that comes only when survival depends on it. Some days were better than others, though. She met other people who had been cast out or had nowhere to go, and for a brief moment, she felt a connection, a sense that she wasn't entirely alone. They shared stories of hardship and survival, and though it was difficult to hear, it also gave her courage, courage to keep going, courage to believe that her life could still change. But not everything was easy, and despair often returned like a shadow, reminding her of the life she had lost. She thought about her adoptive family, wondering why they had abandoned her, replaying their words over and over in her mind. The anger and sadness sometimes threatened to consume her, but she learned to push it aside, knowing that dwelling on it would only make her weaker. Through all the struggles, she began to notice things about herself that surprised her. She realized she was braver than she thought, smarter than she believed, and more determined than she had ever known. Each day she survived felt like a small victory, and each victory, no matter how small, became a reason to keep moving forward. Little did she know, these hardships, these lonely nights and scary days, were preparing her for something she never could have imagined, a turning point, a moment that would change everything. The streets that felt so cruel now were teaching her lessons of resilience, courage, and hope, lessons she would carry with her for the rest of her life. And so, even when her feet ached and her stomach growled, she continued walking, holding on to that tiny spark of hope that had never left her. The streets had taken much from her, but they had also given her strength, and somehow, deep inside, she knew her life was about to change, though she could not yet see how. She had walked for hours, the city lights flickering above her like tiny stars she could almost reach but never quite touch. Her legs were sore, and her stomach ached, but she kept moving, driven by a small hope that somewhere, somehow, things would get better. As she turned down a quiet street, she didn't notice the sleek black car slowing nearby, or the man inside, who had been watching the city pass by from the comfort of his luxury vehicle. The man was a millionaire, a figure well known in the business world for his sharp mind and busy schedule, yet even with all his wealth and success, there was something human in him, a curiosity that sometimes pulled him out of his routine. On this night, something in the way the young girl walked caught his attention, something about the slump of her shoulders, the emptiness in her eyes, made him stop and watch. He could have ignored her, turned the car and continued on, but something made him pause. Something told him that this was not just another person on the street. This girl was different. There was a fragility about her, but also a quiet strength that peeked through in the way she held her head up despite her exhaustion. He watched her hesitate as she looked at a closed store window, her reflection staring back at her, the mix of fear and determination visible in her eyes. For a moment, she noticed him, the man in the car, but quickly looked away, unsure if he was a friend or someone dangerous. Her instincts, sharpened by the months on the streets, told her to be cautious, yet something about his calm presence was oddly reassuring. She felt a flicker of curiosity, a tiny whisper in her mind wondering why he was looking at her so intently. The millionaire stepped out of his car, a gentle but confident presence in the cold night air. He didn't approach aggressively, didn't demand attention, he simply called out softly, asking if she was okay. His voice was kind, steady, and unexpectedly warm, and she froze, unsure how to respond, unsure whether this was a trick, a test, or truly someone willing to help. He noticed her hesitation, the cautious way she kept her distance, and smiled slightly, understanding that trust could not be forced. Instead, he waited, giving her the space to decide what to do. His patience was unusual in a world that often demanded instant results, and somehow, that patience made her lower her guard just a little, enough to glance back at him. to study his expression and find no hint of malice. After what felt like an eternity, she took a small step toward him, curiosity pushing past fear. Her life had been full of sudden endings and sharp betrayals, and yet, something about this moment felt like it could be different. She didn't know what he would offer, if anything, but the way he looked at her made her feel, for the first time in months, seen, not judged, not ignored. The millionaire extended a hand, not in a commanding way, but as an offer, a bridge between two very different worlds. In that instant, she realized that this could be the turning point she had been waiting for, the moment when her story might finally take a different path. She didn't know what he would do next, but a sense of cautious hope began to bloom in her chest, fragile yet undeniable. It was a chance encounter, nothing more than a brief meeting on an ordinary street, yet, like all life-changing moments, it carried the weight of destiny, of possibilities that seemed impossible just hours before. Neither of them knew yet how this meeting would alter the course of her life, or how one simple act could ripple into a story that would shock everyone. But in that quiet night, under the dim glow of streetlights, something had shifted. A spark had been lit, and her life was on the brink of a change she could never have imagined. The millionaire looked at her for a long moment, studying the exhaustion etched on her face, the dirt on her clothes, and the sadness that seemed too heavy for anyone to carry alone. He could see the weight of her life in her eyes, the kind of loneliness that could crush someone quietly if left unchecked, and yet, despite everything, there was a quiet strength in her posture, a resilience that made him pause and consider. Without saying much, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a warm blanket. Holding it out to her gently, she hesitated at first, unsure if he was serious or if this was just another trap, another disappointment waiting to happen, but something in the kindness of his eyes, the calmness in his voice, told her that this time might be different, that maybe, just maybe, someone truly wanted to help her. She took the blanket with trembling hands, wrapping it around her shoulders as a small comfort against the cold night. She felt a warmth that went beyond the physical, a strange sense that she was being seen, truly seen. For the first time in a long while, the millionaire didn't speak much, just gave her space and let the small gestures speak louder than words, offering her something she had almost forgotten existed: care, compassion, and hope. Then, slowly, he began to ask questions, gentle ones, the kind that didn't pressure her but invited her to share her story if she wanted to. She told him little by little, starting with her life with her adoptive family, the day she was kicked out, the months she had spent struggling on the streets. Her voice wavered, but he listened without interruption, nodding, offering small words of encouragement, creating a space where her pain could exist without judgment. He didn't pity her, and that mattered more than she could explain. His eyes held respect, not sympathy, and that made her feel stronger, like maybe she was worthy of more than just survival, maybe she could have a chance at a real life again. For the first time in months, she smiled, a hesitant, fragile smile, but one that surprised even her with its brightness. The millionaire knew he couldn't solve all her problems in one night, and he didn't pretend he could, but he could offer her safety for now, a temporary place where she could rest, eat, and feel human again. The relief she felt was overwhelming, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her small victories of survival suddenly seemed possible to build upon. He offered to drive her somewhere safe, a small, quiet apartment where she could stay, away from the dangers of the streets. She climbed into his car cautiously, but the gentle way he treated her reassured her. There were no demands, no questions about who she was or where she came from, just a simple act of kindness that spoke volumes. As they drove through the city, she watched the lights pass by, and for the first time, they didn't feel cold or unwelcoming. They felt alive, full of possibilities, as if the world was suddenly offering her a second chance. The millionaire didn't make promises he couldn't keep, but his presence, his attention, and his genuine care were enough to make her believe that life could be different, that she could rise from the hardships she had endured. That night, wrapped in the blanket and seated in the warmth of the car, she realized something profound. Kindness, even in small acts, could change everything. A single person noticing her, caring enough to act, had shifted the course of her life. She didn't yet know where this path would lead, or how her life would transform, but for the first time in months, fear was joined by hope, and she dared to imagine a future beyond the streets, beyond despair. And so, in the quiet of the night, under the gentle glow of the car lights, an act of kindness planted a seed of change, one that would grow into a life she never could have imagined. One simple choice, one small gesture, had begun to rewrite her story, and in that moment, the impossible felt possible again. The days after that night were unlike anything she had ever imagined. She woke up in a small, warm room that smelled faintly of coffee and fresh linen. A soft mattress replaced the cold concrete she had slept on for so long, and for the first time in months, she felt safe, not just physically but in a way that touched her soul. The millionaire had arranged for her to have a quiet place to stay, but that was only the beginning. He didn't hand her money or make grand promises. He didn't treat her like a charity case. Instead, he offered her choices, guidance, and an opportunity to rebuild. He suggested a small job in one of his businesses, a chance to earn her own living while he provided support for food and schooling. At first, she hesitated, fear holding her back. The streets had taught her that nothing good lasted, that people could vanish as quickly as they appeared, but there was something different about him, a steady patience and quiet confidence that made her believe this time might truly be real. The first day at the job was overwhelming. She was nervous, unsure if she would be able to meet expectations, and constantly afraid of making mistakes. Yet, the millionaire had chosen her carefully, trusting that her resilience and determination would carry her through. He visited her once, not to supervise, but just to check if she was settling in. His presence was comforting, a reminder that she was not alone, and that there was someone in her corner who believed in her. Slowly, life began to shift. She learned new skills, met kind colleagues, and started to see herself in a new light. The girl who had walked the streets with empty pockets and a heavy heart was now earning, learning, and growing. She discovered talents she hadn't realized she possessed: creativity, intelligence, and an ability to adapt that amazed even herself. Each day became a small victory, a proof that her past struggles had not broken her, but had prepared her for this moment. Her confidence grew, and with it, her dreams began to return. The idea that she could have a life beyond survival, that she could aim higher, and that she could be respected for who she was, not judged for where she had come from, filled her with a quiet excitement. She started planning for the future, thinking about education, independence, and a life where she could help others who had been in her place. The millionaire watched her transformation with quiet pride, not boasting or showing off, but content in the knowledge that a single act of kindness had started a ripple effect. The encounter on that cold street, which could have been a fleeting moment, had become the turning point in her life, teaching both of them that compassion and trust could create extraordinary changes. One afternoon, she realized how far she had come. Sitting in a small office, completing tasks she had once thought impossible, she felt a rush of gratitude and strength. The hardships she had endured didn't vanish, but they had become stepping stones, lessons she could carry forward, and a source of motivation rather than despair. She also realized that this turning point was not just about the millionaire or his help. It was about her own courage to accept help, to trust again, and to take steps forward when fear had once frozen her in place. She had been given a second chance, but it was her own determination, bravery, and willingness to try that made the change real. That moment marked a subtle but powerful shift, the point where she stopped being just a survivor and started becoming someone who could truly live. She understood that life could be cruel, unpredictable, and unfair, but she had learned that hope, combined with the right support, could overturn even the darkest circumstances. The turning point wasn't dramatic or flashy, it was quiet, steady, and real, the kind that transforms a life slowly but surely. And so, with each passing day, she stepped further away from the fear and loneliness of the streets, embracing the opportunities before her, building a life that once seemed impossible. The turning point had arrived, and with it, a new story began, one filled with resilience, hope, and the promise of a future she could finally call her own. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months, and with each passing moment, she could feel herself changing in ways she had never imagined. The girl who had wandered the streets alone, scared and hungry, was now stepping into a life that felt real, safe, and full of possibility. She began to wake up each morning with a sense of purpose, no longer weighed down by fear or uncertainty. Her work gave her confidence she had never known. Each small task completed, each problem solved, reminded her that she was capable, that her mind was sharp, and that her hands could create, fix, and build. She took pride in the little things, the way she organized files, helped clients, or even just learned to manage a schedule. but even the small victories added up, slowly reshaping her sense of self. She also started to rebuild her appearance, something she had neglected while surviving on the streets. New clothes, a proper bath, and a haircut were not about vanity, but about reclaiming her dignity, about showing herself that she mattered, and that the world could recognize her worth. People began to notice her, treating her with respect and kindness, something she had almost forgotten existed, and it changed her slowly from the inside out. Her relationships with others began to shift as well. She met people who genuinely cared, co-workers who encouraged her, friends who listened without judgment, and mentors who guided her. Each interaction, each kind word, helped her heal, piece by piece. It was in these small connections that she realized transformation wasn't just about money, shelter, or jobs. It was about love, respect, and trust. Education also became a part of her journey, something she had given up on when she was on the streets. She took classes, read books, and absorbed knowledge with a hunger she had never experienced before. Every page she turned, every lesson learned, made her feel stronger, smarter, and more in control of her future. She began to dream bigger, imagining a life that was once unimaginable, a life where she could thrive, not just survive. The millionaire continued to support her, but more quietly now, observing from a distance as she grew into her potential. His presence was no longer just safety, it had become a foundation upon which she could build. The encouragement and trust he had shown her had helped her take risks, face challenges, and grow into the person she was meant to be. One evening, as she walked home from work, she paused to reflect on how far she had come. She remembered the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear, and she realized that those experiences, as painful as they had been, had made her strong, resilient, and determined. She was no longer the girl who felt invisible. She had become someone who could face the world with confidence and courage. Her transformation was not just external, it was deeply internal. She had learned patience, resilience, empathy, and gratitude, lessons that money alone could never buy. She understood the value of kindness because she had experienced cruelty. She understood the importance of trust because she had been abandoned, and most importantly, she understood her own worth because she had been made to feel worthless. By the time 6 months had passed, she was almost unrecognizable from the scared, lonely girl who had wandered the streets. Not just in appearance, but in spirit. She walked taller, spoke with assurance, and smiled with genuine warmth. Her laughter, once quiet and rare, now filled rooms, spreading light to those around her. The world no longer felt threatening, it felt full of opportunities she could reach for. And yet, she never forgot the streets, the struggle, or the moment when the millionaire had first seen her. Those memories reminded her of where she had come from, grounding her, keeping her humble, and inspiring her to give back someday. She realized that transformation was not just about changing her own life, but about using her experience to inspire and help others. The girl who had once been alone, afraid, and hopeless had become a young woman full of hope, courage, and determination. She had transformed not just her circumstances, but herself, her mind, and her heart, and in that transformation, she found the truest kind of freedom, freedom from fear, doubt, and despair, freedom to live, to dream, and to shine. She often found herself sitting quietly at night, reflecting on everything that had happened, the streets, the fear, the hunger, and the loneliness. They all felt like a lifetime ago, yet, at the same time, they were still very much a part of her, shaping who she had become. She realized that those painful moments had taught her lessons no classroom or book ever could. She thought about her adoptive family, the ones who had turned their backs on her, and a mix of emotions swept over her, anger, sadness, and even moments of disbelief. How could people she had trusted so completely abandon her so suddenly? She wondered, but then she also understood something profound. Their rejection did not define her worth, it was their loss, not hers. She had survived, and she had grown, and that was far more important than their approval. Looking back, she saw her journey in a new light. She remembered the nights she had curled up under cold streetlights, feeling invisible and hopeless, and she marveled at how far she had come. Those nights, once filled with despair, had become symbols of strength, reminders that she had endured more than most people could imagine, and that endurance had made her unbreakable. She also reflected on the millionaire, the stranger who had noticed her on that cold night. She realized that his kindness had been more than just an act, it had been a catalyst, a spark that had ignited her courage, his faith in her, his patience, and his quiet support had reminded her that people could be good, that trust could be rebuilt, and that hope could exist even in the darkest moments. She thought about how one act of kindness had the power to change the course of a life, and it inspired her to believe that she, too, could help others someday. Her reflections led her to understand the value of resilience. The girl who had once trembled at every noise, afraid of danger lurking in every shadow, had transformed into a young woman who faced life head-on, not because her circumstances had changed overnight, but because she had chosen to rise above them. Each setback, each tear, each lonely night had shaped her courage, and now she carried that courage like a shield, ready for whatever challenges might come. She realized that transformation was more than external, it was internal. She had grown emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, learning patience, gratitude, and empathy in ways she never expected. She had discovered that her worth was not determined by what others thought or how they treated her, but by her own actions, choices, and resilience. That realization brought a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that she had never felt before. As she reflected, she also recognized the importance of perspective. She understood that life's hardships were not punishments, but lessons, that the struggles she had faced were not meant to break her, but to prepare her for the life she was about to embrace. She realized that everyone has challenges, but it is the way one responds to them that defines who they truly are. Her response had been courage, determination, and hope, and those qualities had brought her to this moment. She also thought about the future with newfound clarity. Instead of fearing uncertainty, she felt excitement. The unknown no longer seemed terrifying, it seemed full of possibility. She wanted to make the most of her second chance, to build a life not just for herself, but one that could inspire others. She thought about helping those who had been abandoned, lonely, or overlooked, offering them the same hope and kindness that had once saved her. Through all these reflections, she discovered something she had never known before, that life is not just about surviving, but about growing, learning, and transforming, that the pain of the past can become the strength of the present, and the hope of the future, and in that understanding, she felt whole, empowered, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The girl who had once felt invisible had become someone who could reflect, understand, and act with purpose. She had learned the true meaning of resilience, kindness, and hope, and she knew, deep in her heart, that her story was only just beginning. Her reflections had not only healed her past wounds but also prepared her for the life she was meant to live, a life full of courage, compassion, and endless possibilities. By now, she had traveled a long journey, one that had taken her from the cold streets to warmth, from despair to hope, and from fear to courage. The girl who had once felt invisible and abandoned had grown into a young woman who carried herself with dignity, strength, and confidence. She had learned lessons that no classroom could teach, lessons about resilience, kindness, trust, and the power of one small moment to change everything. Word of her story began to spread quietly at first. Among those who knew her, co-workers, neighbors, and friends, people were inspired by the way she had faced heartbreak and loneliness and had emerged stronger, not because someone handed her everything, but because she had been brave enough to accept help, learn, and fight for a better life. Her journey became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could shine. She often thought about the night that had changed everything, the night the millionaire had noticed her, had shown her compassion, and had given her a second chance. That single act of kindness had become the turning point, not only for her, but also for everyone who witnessed her transformation. It reminded people that true power does not always come from wealth or status, but from empathy, courage, and the choice to help when it matters most. Her life had transformed, but she never forgot where she came from. The streets, the fear, and the loneliness were still part of her story, and it was because of those experiences that she could now inspire others. She began volunteering in shelters, speaking to young people who felt hopeless, and sharing her journey with those who needed to believe in second chances. Every smile she brought to someone else's face reminded her of the kindness that had saved her, and it gave her purpose. Her story reached more people over time. Through social media, local news, and community events, people were amazed by the resilience of a young woman who had been abandoned yet refused to let despair define her. They were touched by the way a simple act of noticing, a single gesture of kindness, had transformed a life forever. It became a story not just about survival, but about inspiration, empathy, and the incredible potential within every person. She realized that inspiration works in cycles. One act of courage or kindness can ripple outward, touching lives in ways one cannot imagine. Her encounter with the millionaire had inspired her, and now, in turn, she inspired others. Her journey showed that change does not require grand gestures, only the courage to act, the willingness to accept help, and the determination to keep moving forward. As she reflected on everything she had overcome, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons learned in hardship, gratitude for the people who had shown her kindness, and gratitude for her own resilience. She understood that life could be unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but also full of extraordinary surprises, that the smallest decisions could create the largest impact, and that hope, when nurtured, could light the darkest paths. Her story became a beacon for those who had lost faith, a reminder that even when it seems the world has turned its back, there is always a chance for change, for transformation, and for a new beginning. She became living proof that heartbreak can be a stepping stone, that loneliness can build strength, and that courage and compassion together can create miracles. And so, the girl who had once wandered the streets, cold, hungry, and alone, now stood as a symbol of hope, a testament to resilience, and an inspiration to everyone who heard her story. Her journey had not only changed her life, but it had the power to touch countless others, showing that no matter how dark the night may seem, a single spark of kindness can ignite a lifetime of light. Her story ended not with despair, but with possibility, not with fear, but with hope, and not with isolation, but with connection. It reminded everyone that life is unpredictable, struggles are real, and yet, courage, empathy, and resilience can overcome even the greatest challenges. And as she continued forward, she carried not only her own dreams, but the dreams of everyone she had inspired, proving that one life transformed can inspire 1,000 more.